Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, and attendees, a warm welcome. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm really honored today to moderate this panel discussion on the very important topic of digital infrastructure, a game changer, which is part of BCA's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Coming to any BCA event is almost like a homecoming to me. I've spent a lot of time in my early youth at BCA, and I have some old friends sitting there and hope to make some new friends today after my session. Today, the digital landscape is evolving at an unprecedented pace, and the foundation of that truly is digital infrastructure. It affects societies, economies, and industries. The phrase game changer, which is being used for this today's topic, really describes the power of digital infrastructure, the transformative power. It is reshaping the way we live, the way we work, and the way we connect. We are witnessing a paradigm shift in the way businesses are done, the way government delivers services, and the way every individual is absorbing news, food, and everything else. The decisions we make today regarding digital infrastructure will shape the contours of tomorrow's world. It's that important. I'm delighted to have this rockstar panel of Dilip and Deepak. And I hope to, in the next 45-50 minutes, absorb as much knowledge from them as possible. I'll ask some questions to both of them, and I think there is a software on the basis of which you can ask some questions, and they'll pop up to me on the screen. So feel free to ask questions. This is your chance to get Dilip and Deepak on stage and ask them questions. Let me start with Dilip. Impact of digitization on small towns. It's a topic which has been discussed many times. India versus Bharat, large cities versus small towns. You know, in the good old days, you might remember, there was a phone called Iridium, and the tagline was, "Geography is history." Is it happening now? Does it matter where you're located?
No, it doesn't matter. I think the digital by its nature, kind of creates democratization of the service. That's a core property what digital brings to all of us. As Mr. Birla was saying that, irrespective of anybody in the country has, thanks to digital, access to the digital infrastructure, whether it's Aadhaar, UPI, and any of the other digital infra which we have set up as a country. And, I think the whole thought process, Prime Minister's vision on this whole jam trinity, right, kind of played a foundational block to create this public infrastructures, right? So Jandan account, the Aadhaar and the mobile. And today, if you go back to any town, and if you have to just restrict to payments, today, whether it's a small town, whether it's a large town, you see the QR codes all over, UPI QR codes all over. Consumers are able to pay, merchants are able to receive. The smaller merchants, I must say that a large beneficiary of the digital payments, because earlier they were only participating on the cash, which is like what the consumer has, it's in wallet. Now they are able to get the share of consumer's bank account, which is kind of unlimited in that sense. And obviously once we now look at digitization, while we kind of say a lot has been done, but I personally believe a lot more can happen. I think where we are, we see a 10x growth in digitization possible. And today, you must have seen, we do about, on an annual basis, we have, as a country, we have crossed about 100 billion transactions on an annum. And I think, why not 100 billion a month? That should be our aspiration.
So a lot more can happen, you're saying. Can you kind of elaborate one or two things that can happen?
So, when I see the basic building block of Jam Trinity and a payment infrastructure, which I believe is kind of a infrastructure layer for the user to access the financial services. Now, what could be those financial services? It could be lending, it could be insurance, and it could be investments, right? So, and when you look at this whole surge on fintechs and the funding what we received in fintech last 3 years, and I'm sure it's going to go on. I think it's a kind of an indicator that we have a huge growth possible, and that's where the capital is coming. And I believe that as the country's economy is growing, per capita is growing, the ability to spend on financial services, ability to spend on discretionary spends is going to, it's like a combined effect which will kind of further push back the GDP.
So do you see yourself working from a small town in future with better AQI than this 200-300 which you have in Bombay?
Whatever it is, I have been like born and brought up in Bombay. So whatever is the AQI, I live in Bombay.
AQI in Bombay, it doesn't matter. So, Dilip mentioned about fintech, and that takes me to Deepak. India has probably the largest kind of spread and depth and breadth and width of fintech startups, because the kind of complexities is there, which I don't think anywhere in the world we have. What do you see the future of fintechs, and are regulations keeping pace with it? Do we need to see more regulations, less regulations?
No, I think great question. I'll break it into two parts. Like you said, what is the future of fintech? And the second is the regulation and how regulations are either keeping pace or leading or following the innovation cycle. I think the future of fintech, this theme itself of reimagine what we have here, holds true, because there are a lot of fintechs who are starting afresh, but like we all know, the mortality is very, very high, especially with the current funding environment. It's still relatively easy for fintechs to get a seed capital, but it's extremely difficult for them to go towards Series A, and then Series A to Series B is even higher. So I think there is a big shift I'm seeing in the business models of fintech. 2 or 3 years back, I think we used to hear in a lot of events stuff like buy now, pay later, or BNPL as one of the themes. And a lot of them were there to create these small ticket, sachet loan embedded on checkout. Today, you don't see most of them around. I think similarly, when we looked at a lot of these digital lending apps, they went through a shift. I think we have seen a fair amount of mortality even in the wealth tech space. So I think if you look at sector by sector within financial service itself, I think B2C environment, that is direct to customer environment, I think there it's becoming tough. Because incumbents like banks or insurance companies or asset management companies, they themselves are digitizing. So maybe 3 years back, they probably were lagging. But today, incumbents are going and saying, even we can go and do the same thing that fintechs were doing. So I think we are seeing there is a shift in the model through which fintechs operate. However, I think there are a set of new opportunities coming, and I'm seeing a lot of fintechs addressing, be it on building the digital infrastructure around OCEN, which is the Open Credit Network, or building the layer of things on top of ONDC, on building certain things on the checkout and e-commerce side, creating the next set of capabilities on top of account aggregator and the data and consent framework, or even working very closely with what Dilip and his team has been running to build, say, the credit on UPI. Especially as credit cards got opened, or you can set up the limits. So I think in fintech, we always are finding there are a set of those guys who are thinking ahead. They are more likely to probably succeed. But if you're just going and solving a problem for today, I think that market is becoming extremely crowded. The second part of it, what you asked about the regulation, I think regulators are doing a commendable job, let me tell you that, because I think India, with the kind of mushrooming of fintechs that we had, we always find few bad apples who go and then create a bad name for the larger community, which is reasonably compliant. And regulators have started to come after, be it through the digital lending guidelines, to say what kind of, the disclosures and sharing APRs upfront, or probably the commingling of funds, to even looking at the payment aggregator guidelines and licensing. So I think regulators are more progressive. Regulators are open for having a dialogue. And in fact, in the last Global FinTech Fest, when the governor spoke himself, saying that FinTech should set up a self-regulatory organization, because I think what regulators are expecting FinTechs to do is to build a higher level of due diligence and compliance as a part of their culture, rather than leaving it for regulators to come and chase and then they prescribe. So I think as FinTechs start to realize that if you are in financial service, there is a strong value of building a compliance culture on day zero and not when you are too big. And I think all these are the positive shift I'm seeing through which we are progressing in our country.
Sure, so we are in a room full. You want to add something? Yeah.
So I think I just want to add one point. I think the regulator government is actually far ahead, right? I'm just saying that and I think today where we are, I think the true credit of even attempting to create a digital society or a knowledge economy goes back to the government and the regulators. You look at RBI, while of course, setting up the entities like NPCI, they have done a kind of institution building in that true sense. But even every monetary policy of RBI kind of comes up with few innovative ideas, and I don't think we have missed one till last few years. And whether it's look at SEBI starting up that secondary market investments using UPI. So I think the government, the regulators are driving the innovation in the forefront, right? I think democratization, the ease of use to the consumers and businesses, I think this is running top of their mind in my assessment.
So Deepak, we are in a room full of chartered accountants, and there's always the WAM principle, what here applies to me. So what role do you see finance professional chartered accountants playing in this evolving fintech scenario?
I think fintechs today, especially in current environment, as I talk to them, they do need a fair amount of understanding when the money or the tap dries. I think one of the first things they are obviously more concerned about is what is my runway and how long can I be in this place? Because you start realizing that when there is a reasonable flow, I think then everybody knows there is a song and dance. But I think when the party stops, it starts to become harder. I think a lot of fintechs, what I've seen, they start from a good product mindset or a technology mindset. That's how they get started. But I think as they start to move towards a growth stage, they start looking at a lot more about what is the right way to raise the next round of capital. Should it be a debt or a venture debt, or do they need to go and dilute further? A lot of founders probably dilute too early and too much, and then they realize that they probably have lost a greater control of their own firm. So I think from a chartered accountant community, I do see that a lot of founders, they do need that kind of a help and assistance in terms of understanding how to access the play of raising capital, what's the right structure through which they should, what kind of controlling rights should they have as they are going out in the market, when they have the kind of term sheets where at times the pressure to raise the next round gets you to do things which probably you regret later. And many founders, friends of mine, I have seen them go through this. And they are not young 20-something guys. Even those who are in their mid-40s or late 30s, they do make those mistakes. So I think this is one area I definitely see the chartered accountant community can engage and create value through whatever worked in the old world economy is still very relevant in the new economy, even if the technology or platform or the business models are different.
So we have a runway of 30 minutes. I'm going to make the most of it. Over to Dilip. I want to ask you about cybercrime. Is it a hype or is it reality? Loss of data and privacy, are issues we always read and it scares a lot of people. Again, hype or reality? And what words of advice can you give to this room full of chartered accountants?
So cyber security, right, or information security, because now that we have a privacy act in place, data protection act in place, I think the information security and the privacy issues are going to be at the forefront for next few years. And simply because of, I think, two vectors I see. One is, as the country moves towards the digitization, right, which means that everything is on digital. Virtually our life is on the phone, including not only the documentation and those kind of things, but our financial access, most of the access of what we do in life. And the second part on the privacy side, as we start using more and more services digitally, we generate a lot more data, and that data is really valuable, right? So everybody's going to eye on that data. So one is, once we start becoming digital, the access becomes very important. So all the cyber kind of thieves will start looking at, kind of getting access on data or the access itself, or the privacy, which is the data. Now, again, I think we have the robust protection in terms of law, while we are a little delayed in getting the law, but now the law is in place. Couple of things what we should look at, and some of the countries have adopted, is they have certain amount of budget to be spent on cyber security, for example, at least for the financial services. I think in India that awareness and that reality is not really stuck unless the incident happened, right? People do not fully appreciate that, the risk emanating from that. And I think the regulator has been working very closely with the industry to come up with the guidelines. Some of the standards we have adopted back. Obviously, the standards are good to have, not sufficient enough. So, a lot more investments are required, and many of the fintechs, the banks, when they look at the investments into the IT spends, the change management, the cybersecurity spends, there must be some benchmark that, this much money investments has to happen. The threat is very real, and, today, and we keep hearing that the data theft incidents globally, also in India. So I think it's very real. I think this is something which keeps most of the financial services expert awake in the night.
So you mentioned about benchmarks one should have for this investment. What is it? It's a percentage, it's an amount. I mean, there are a lot of bank people, including one on the left. He was in a big bank. And can you give some guidelines what they should be?
So, for example,
how do you measure the benchmark?
So some of the things which I had heard that, about 25% of your IT spends should be on a cyber and information security both, right? 25% of your IT budget. So something like that.
Looks quite high, Deepak, 25% in India. What would you say? Or we should
I think we would be already around 10%, my assessment.
Yeah, so I think Dilip is right, because see, today the spends are not 25. I think what Dilip is saying is it should be, right?
About 10%.
Yeah,
that's what I see it all.
No, I think it's becoming increasingly large. So there are two major spends today financial services are incurring. One is on the resilience, and the second is on security. When I say resilience, the application modernization, infrastructure upgrade, all that is part of that, because now your uptimes and your real-time monitoring, and then security gets embedded into everything that you do. To that extent, yes. And I think in my mind, that is one area that will continue to get higher and higher allocation as we progress, because this is like a one-way street. You keep investing and you still have so much more to plug in.
Sure. So as a reminder, you can ask questions by scanning the code on your table, and the questions will pop up over here. We won't have running mics, so I'm sure you don't want to miss an opportunity to ask question to Dilip and Deepak. Please ask the question on that app, and someone will direct it to me on this screen.
Ninad, I just want to go back to your last question on the opportunities for the community, and the startup. Deepak was talking about the competition is getting higher and higher, and you will see. But I think that's going to be the game for us, right? I think when we look at the startup community, fintech community, I think the 10 to 20% success rate, right, is a great success rate in my assessment. I think even if a 10% success rate in my assessment. And second is, from the opportunity perspective, I fully agree with what Deepak said, that most of the fintech guys or the founders are the technology guys, right? And definitely they don't understand head or tail of what is that, how do I get money, how much I dilute. So I think this whole business finance, right, is a great opportunity for the community, and that would include the entire life cycle. As Deepak said, how do you, and whole strategization of this whole finance capital strategy. I think that's a big community, because number of times the company utilizes the chartered accountancy firms for the financial activities, but very few utilize them for the business finance. But I think, and knowing some of the chartered accountants, they can give a great advice, if you really ask me, on very simple issues like, how much, what is at any particular time, how do you raise money, whether the cheaper option is a debt or dilution of your equity. So I think business finance is going to be the great area as we get into the fintech era or the startups era.
So I have got a bunch of questions, and we have now limited time. So please keep your responses. I have not expected a bunch of questions in front of me. So, maybe you could give some quick responses to most of them. Here's question to NPCI is, what path-breaking things are being implemented in the next 5 years for digital infrastructure other than ONDC? So what's the next 5 years? What can we see?
So there are, I think the government is planning variety of things, such as health stack, the agri stack, and some of the initiatives from that standpoint. Let me speak about, what is NPCI is looking at. One of the things which we are kind of actively looking at is, use of latest technology, whether it's AI or blockchain, in terms of, whether it's a fraud algorithms or the algorithms which will give us more insights on data that we process. The second is the blockchain. We have looked at, now the regulator has come back with the CBDC, central bank digital currency, using the blockchain as a technology. And I strongly believe the technologies like AI and blockchain has a great future back in the in next 5 years time. The second part is obviously, while, when we looked at the infrastructure, what the payments have been simplified, right? Now, how do we use this simplified infrastructure to kind of create a complex use cases, right? So for example, I spoke about the secondary market investments using UPI, and looking at the running the whole credit life cycle on UPI, which is whether it's a virtual credit, whether it's a credit line as approved by the RBI. So I think next few years, we believe that the whole backbone of the simplified payments or financial services infra, we will see a lot more complex use cases leveraging that infra.
Great. So Deepak, over to you. There are a bunch of questions. How do you see the future of digital currency and e-rupee?
I think very early days, as Dilip said, we have started, but like any new thing, initially it takes a while and then it just picks up. I think we are yet to see that inflection moment because it depends on the right use cases where we use digital currency. Often I realize that people get confused between a digital currency and UPI, and I will take this opportunity with Dilip around that UPI is a way to pay where any instrument can ride a credit, a debit, a prepaid, or a digital currency. Digital currency of its own, I think there are many use cases planned either immediately or later, be it programmable, be it for remittance, be it for certain other use cases, which I'm sure RBI will disclose. I'm not allowed to speak about certain things that I am aware of. But yes, I think there is a lot of work and effort happening to develop that ecosystem between banks, the issuers. NPCI, of course, is playing a very important role. And more importantly, like it took us years and years to educate about the UPI, I think it will take time for consumers to understand. Last evening, I was surprised. I was taking a RIC, and an auto guy told me that how he's so fed up of people trying to pass him a 500 and 200 rupee fake note that he had a QR in his auto, but he said, now I'm thinking of taking a digital currency, kya hota hai? He started asking me, and I was really intrigued. Believe me, finally I asked his name because I said, yaar, I'm yet to see such progress.
उसका फोटो लेना था.
Because उसने ना वो हवा ऐसे अपना ऑटो का लाइट जलाया, and he says, sir, ये ना ऐसे लोग मेरे को फेक नोट देते हैं, मुझे पता चल गया है कि एक जो भी क्रिस्पी नोट होगा. He said, मेरे को डिजिटल करेंसी चाहिए. And I realize if there are more people like him who start to see there is a merit of taking a e-rupee, I think we will see that taking off.
Well, that's revolution. If the auto guy is asking for digital currency, it has at least reached that level.
It's a very promising technology. I think the underlying technology on CBDC is very powerful, and I think as Deepak said, whether it's a asset tokenization, delivery versus payment, once the regulator starts implementing the use cases, and I think it's a wow kind of a tech. It's a next-gen tech.
So in a room full of chartered accountants, you can expect this question, Dilip.
That's why, I've decided I'm not going to speak about numbers. The CA sitting here.
GST portal, MCA portal, income tax portal were not tested and launched properly, leading to loss of face and loss of confidence. What more could have been done before its launch?
See, and any digital reform, right? We face this problem in UPI also, to be honest, and that's where RBI has been kind of putting a lot of pressure on NPCI to ensure that NPCI is able to step up and able to respond back to the expectations of the ecosystem. And it's a part of the digital journey. In my assessment, when you start anything on a citizen scale, it takes time to stabilize. Obviously, I fully agree with you that we could have there are better methods to kind of look at, anticipate the load and test your systems, but sometimes these things happen, and it has happened with NPCI as well. There has been incidents, downtimes, but I think the more important part of it, Ninad, is how as a public infrastructure we are able to recover. And yes, there would be glitches, but I think what is more important is we are able to recover and respond, right? I think that's what the emphasis of the regulator is also back on this critical services. But I'm sure, and I think those are the days of past. I think we don't see those things coming back again.
Okay, those are days of past. Hopefully it doesn't come back. So Deepak, there's one person 2-3 times has asked the same question, and you're with a leading bank, so I'm sure you must have thought of all this. Super senior citizens, how do you include them in digital banking? The challenges they face. Is there an easy way to do it, or enough thought has been given to super senior citizen? This is 2-3 times the gentleman has asked the question.
I think great question, and this. So one, I think banks are increasingly not offering digital banking by default to senior citizens, especially over the age of 75. And I think it's important, while we all want to encourage more and more digital adoption and push, but it's more of a principle call to say that customers should be ready, especially senior citizens, and don't just tick mark, okay, enabled for a mobile app or internet banking, because you are exposing them to certain risks that they are not even aware of. I think that's the first thing. The second, I think while we still have a lot of work to do, like I know Dilip and his team runs very regular those great educational campaign on UPI frauds, but I think we still have a long way to go just by sending messages to customers on a periodic basis or some campaign is still not enough, because forget senior citizens, we are finding well-educated professionals also falling prey to phishing and wishing. So I think in my mind, assisted banking probably still works best for senior citizen community, unless they are ready to or they have a family member who is willing to help them. And there's no single answer, but all I'm saying, if they're not ready, we should not push them towards digital adoption.
Okay, that's a frank answer.
And also I heard some of the new apps which are coming, which are especially for seniors. I met one of the startups, GenWise. They're coming up with an app, which has a kind of a larger fonts, very simplified UI, the voice interface and those kind of things. So I'm sure especially from a digitalization perspective, the younger generation, which is below 18 and above 65, I think it's a great opportunity for the fintechs to focus on.
Great. So we have just, I want to get the session back on track to 4:45. I'll close at sharp 4:45. We have a couple of minutes left. So please post your questions if you have. This is your last chance. So Dilip, there are 2-3 questions relating to small businesses and small firms leveraging digital infrastructure. How can they do it?
So again, the digital infrastructure, right? And there are two parts to this, right? One is what the regulator adopts. One is the direct regulation, right? Which is the central infrastructures like NPCI or CCIL or the other networks. And the other is the banks, right? Which is the direct regulation. RBI has slowly started expanding that zone of direct regulation. So whether it's a payment aggregators Deepak spoke about, so the entities like, for example, PayU, Pine Labs, Paytm, and Razorpay, and those kind of entities kind of helps to digitize the small businesses. And then there is something called as a indirect regulation, which is whether it's a merchant or technology service providers. So while this regulated entities, non-bank entities would be around 50-60, which will kind of help to onboard small businesses, there is another 100-200 technology companies which are kind of helping them to help them to connect to UIDI, NPCI, and the Bharat bill payments and those kind of things. So there is a chain of regulated and unregulated entities, direct and indirect regulated entities to connect back.
So there's a direct question to you. Will levy of charges on UPI transactions affect its usage? I had promised I won't ask you difficult questions.
So this is a difficult question again. But let me, okay, look, I'm just saying that today, when the India has to grow 10x, right? When I say 10x, there is another 300, 400 or 500 million people who are supposed to come inside the financial services. There is similar, another 2x or 3x kind of merchants or small businesses which are still outside the digital payments. So now, if we want to grow 10x, we need to kind of get them inside. Somebody has to invest on them, right? It's a difficult job now, right? While network effect is kicking up and kind of helping us to expand UPI, but there would be serious amount of investments required to innovate, to bring the participants that are outside or people who are sitting on the edge, to convince them that digital payments is safe, giving them some incentives, cashbacks, and those kind of things. So it needs money. I think the point number one. Point number two is while the charges have been made zero, predominantly to kind of ensure that the ecosystem adopts this wholeheartedly and that there is not a smallest of resistance from the ecosystem to adopt the digital payments, the government has been kind enough to provide some incentives to the UPI ecosystem, and I think that is kind of helping us to keep going. But in a long-term perspective, right? A reasonable charge, not on a small merchant, but the larger merchants will come. I don't know when it will come. Maybe it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 years down the line. But I think the government is looking at how do we get the town painted red. I think that's the government and RBI's objective to ensure that first, let everybody accept. Let it be, let there be a viable alternative to cash in the country.
So this is a kind of a deep question, but maybe a quick response. So India has adopted its own way, own method. You know, China has Alibaba and all those.
Yeah.
In Africa, there's M-Pesa. So each country has followed, adapted their own way. Do you think India's method, what we are doing now, is the method the global world will adopt as a sound method for a country?
See, I think every country is going to be different. It's going to be different culture, different, the political will, the regulators' kind of capability and standing, right? I think we have been very fortunate as a country where we have a decisive government, we have very, very strong independent regulator. You know, so for example, I will tell you that, when the the regulator kind of gets the interoperability as the first principle, right? You know, when you look at China, unlike India, there are two closed-loop payment systems are dominating 95% of the ecosystem, and you need two different QR codes, you need two different apps, and the obviously consumer has to choose between either of them. Here, while it's the interoperability is the first principle, so I think it's all depends on the what is the position of that country. But let me put it this way: I think the digital the fast digital payments, use of QR codes is inevitable as far as the payment system is concerned worldwide. How do they get it? It's up to the will of the government and the regulator.
So Nilesh Kapadi has asked, how are CA firms to be prepared for personal data protection as we handle a lot of clients' data? Anyone would want to, yeah?
No, I think so. So some of the basic stuff, as we all have to adhere to, is on the personal identifiable information. How's that in terms of storage, transfer, sharing? Because even if there is any data leakage that happens on data in transit, then the responsibility, the whole encryption piece. So I think one has to start looking at obviously the fiduciary responsibility, not just of data custodian, but the data intermediaries through whom, especially when it's outsourced or it's processed by another party. So I think some of those will end up becoming the liability at hand, and I think between the client and the CA firms who are doing, there has to be, just like any company has to make sure that they do the end-to-end due diligence and liability as a part of the clause. I'm sure that would be the way, but I'm sure a lot of these will evolve, because at least when financial institutions outsource a lot of the work to their vendors and partners, I think this is imperative now on the regulated entity to ensure that if there is any leakage, they are held liable. So same way, I'm sure across the value chain, this will go on.
See, the one technical answer which I would like to give you again is, the moment there is a data, and if you are able to de-identify that data, which means that apply algorithm to preserve the uniqueness, but not to be able to identify who's the person or what it actually means, right? I think that will give a highest amount of protection to any CA firm or any entity from that. So the first point of contact, if you are able to de-identify, use the data, and again re-identify and give it back to the entity, can be the one of the sound principle which can be applied by the institutes.
Okay, great. There are a bunch of questions. I've tried to kind of gather them together and asked most of them. I'm going to have a round of rapid fire questions, which I had not told you about. But before that, maybe you want to wind up today's discussion by some words of advice to the CAs here, starting with Deepak. Just 1 or 2 minutes, 1 minute what they can look forward to in the digital landscape, what are the opportunities, challenges. Just a quick roundup.
So I think every business is becoming a digital business. All your clients or companies that you work with. So I think it's equally important to see how the advent of new technologies, including the data privacy, AI, or even Gen AI, impacts positively or adversely both your business and the business of the companies that you work with. So keep an eye on not just what's happening today, but what may likely to happen probably in the near future, which is 12 to 24 months or beyond.
Great. Keep an eye on what's going to happen in future. Dilip, just a quick 1 minute kind of conclusion.
See, I think the CA community could help to grow the entrepreneurship in the country. I think by engaging with them early and kind of really help to support the initiatives like Startup India, build up, those kind of things. And because I think those technical expertise would need the business finance expertise and some early risk, early kind of a call to support them voluntarily and then later on grow along with them. So those kind of approaches would really help the CA community.
Very interesting. You can grow the entrepreneurship in the country. Very deep words. I'm going to wind up with a round of rapid fire. They haven't seen it. It's very simple. You get 2 options. You have to respond in 2 seconds. You can't say neither, both, no comments. They are quick and fun and easy. Most people stop taking my calls after this rapid fire, but I'm going to take a risk. They don't look...
We both are regulated entities, by the way.
They don't look like the kind who will not take my call, so I'm going to take the risk. So starting with Dilip, they're very easy questions. Rapid fire. Within 2 seconds, you can't say neither, you have to respond.
Okay.
In the digital landscape or digital infrastructure, what is more important? Winning idea or strong execution?
I think strong execution.
Strong execution. So that's how it is. Quickly. Yeah.
Strong execution.
You hire for skill or attitude?
Attitude.
You get the product right or change consumer behavior?
Product right.
Product right. Now the next one, your wife may be in the audience, I don't know, so be careful what you respond. What do you look forward to, Friday evening or Monday morning?
Monday mornings.
Monday morning, okay. And if you had one chance to meet either of these 2 people, whom would you meet? Raghuram Rajan or Richard Branson?
So I met Dr. Rajan, so I would meet Branson.
And if you're the finance minister, you've got budget around the corner, one thing you would like to do?
I think just continue the growth supporting agenda.
Continue the growth agenda. Yeah. And the last one, see, it was easy. If you had control over tomorrow's newspaper headlines, what would you like to see on page 1?
I would like to see page 1, NPCI in a positive manner.
NPCI is in a positive manner. Give him a round of applause. He was very sporting. So Deepak, you saw that is not so difficult. Leadership is influence or authority?
Influence.
Customers first or employee first?
Employee first.
Speed or efficiency?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Can you?
Speed or efficiency?
Efficiency.
Cyber audits will become more critical than financial audits. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Agree. Guys, please note. Some people are clapping for that. And if you have to meet either of these 2 people, whom would you meet? Jeff Bezos or Anand Mahindra?
I've met Anand Mahindra, so Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos. Now, since you mentioned Jeff Bezos, imagine you're on a flight with Jeff Bezos who takes you out of space. When you reach out of space, when you leave the Earth, what would you tell him?
How long are we going to be here?
How long are we going to be here? And one line of advice to chartered accountants here, one final line. This is
I think it was right on the stage, reimagine.
Reimagine. Please give them a big round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, we are bang on time. I had promised Amit we will finish on time, whatever time we start. We had interesting conversations. They were quite frank. We spoke a lot about digital infrastructure. The future is here and now. Grab it. And I think Dilip also made an interesting point of CA's nurturing future entrepreneurs. It was a conversation I enjoyed. I hope you all enjoyed as well. Thank you for being a wonderful audience, and thank you both of you for coming in. Thank you.